Hello everybody and welcome to my video today. So at the beginning of this video, I am going to have some basic information about stamping because we're going to dive in this month and I'm going to share a bunch of projects where I use my stamps for memory keeping. And I wanted to kick off this series with a video at the beginning that talked about your basic supplies. So if you're brand new to stamping and you're like, what do I do? Like, what do I need? What are the things that are gonna help me? What should I purchase? I wanna share with you some of the basics. And this is a lot. There's a lot of different things here. And I wanna go over some things. And then I also want to share just the very basics that you might need to get started. So let's dive in with ink pads. So I have a variety of ink pads here. So let's start with ink pads because the first thing you're gonna need are ink pads. And there's a lot of those on the market. I'm gonna start off by showing you the main ink pads that I use and the difference, because there is a difference in ink pads. Now the first one is Stampin' Up. Now back when I first started wanting to use stamps and ink pads in my memory keeping, I was actually just using it to ink the edges of things. So all that means is I took something, let's see, let's just take a piece of cardstock, and I just liked to ink the edges. So I would just ink the edges of whatever it was I was doing. Now you can use a dabber, that is the most common, or blending brushes, but that's what I was wanting to do with ink pads. And I was just buying generic ink pads at like Michael's, but they didn't come with re-inkers, and then I would get them and then like in 3 months I would have to replace them. So I went on a hunt for ink pads that were really good quality. And I found Stampin' Up. Now Stampin' Up ink pads are really different because they open weird. So you pop them open and then they slide. And that is so that your ink pad, the pad right here, always stays upside down and the ink is at more of the surface of your ink pad. That's why it's designed this way. Now, other ink pads, you know, they just have the lid. Now, does this make a huge difference? I don't know. I mean, I have tons of different ink pads. I've never felt like, oh, because this is a lid and it's not upside down, it doesn't work well. I also store my black ink pads. I've stored them like this on the side. They've never leaked. I've never had issues, but that is why this is designed this way. Also, with Stampin' Up ink pads, this pad right here is a foam pad. So it's not felt. So Lawn Fawn is a felt pad, and you can sort of see the difference. If you look really closely right here, you can see that that is a felt ink pad, and that is probably what we're all familiar with from like in our childhood using ink pads. This is a foam ink pad, and in my experience, foam ink pads are better. With a felt ink pad, you have to take a stamp, if there was a stamp on this block, and you have to like really make out with that ink pad. You gotta like really press it down, you know, I mean, you're like in there, you're like making out with it, you're like in the ink pad. With foam ink pads, you just have to tap. It's just a little nice kiss, little tap. So that is a little bit of a difference when you're using the ink pad. Now, there are all kinds of different types of ink. There is waterproof ink, there's pigment ink, there's dye ink. It's going to depend on which ink pad you're using. I'm not going to go into all of that. I don't know all the technical stuff for all of that, and I just don't care. That's the bottom line. The thing that I know is that if I use, I'm probably going to get this wrong now because I'm on the spot. If I am using watercoloring, I need a permanent ink. If I'm using alcohol ink, I need this kind. So my Memento is for when I am using alcohol markers, and my VersaFine is for when I am, So I'll put it, I'll try to type it out on the screen because now I'm nervous and I'm thinking I'm getting it wrong. But there are different types that you need for different mediums. So if you're coloring with alcohol markers, you need a certain kind of black ink. Okay, and then if you're stamping on something that is slick, like vellum or your photos, you need StazOn, and this is a very permanent ink. This ink pad is felt and it tends to dry out very, very quickly. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you have the little plastic thing in there that comes with it. These just dry out super fast, and so you always want to have a re-inker on hand. Okay, the next thing that I want to just make mention really quickly is ink pads are a consumable item. So you can get your ink pad, you can get a re-inker, and you can re-ink this. Over time, it is going to wear out. You're going to have to replace it. Now, really good quality ink pads, you don't have to replace every day or every year, but they do have to be replaced. They do get worn out. This is a liquid. You know, the ink is a liquid. Depending on your environment, stuff may happen to it. I know in certain environments, Stampin' Up! Ink pads in recent years have got like a film on top of them. Some people think it's mold. I don't know if it's mold, but I do know that there's like, sometimes there'll be like little specks on there. Now, I've always just wiped it off and re-inked it and called it good. But just be aware that when you buy an ink pad, it's not something that you will have to replace it at some point. It is a consumable item. So the ink pads that I have that I use most frequently are my Stampin' Up! Ink pads. I was a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator for many years, and I have lots of Stampin' Up! Ink pads. I don't buy these anymore. I just use what I have. I have re-inkers for all of my Stampin' Up! Ink pads, so that's what I use. The ink pads that I am currently purchasing, or that if I need a different color, are the Concord and Ninth. And I love these. They have the foam pad just like the Stampin' Up! Ink pad, so I'm very used to it. I don't mind that the lid just comes off. I will ink my stamp this way, or I will push the stamp into the ink pad. So I like the way that that works. So, and then I always label mine. Mine are always labeled. I have a handful of Lawn Fawn inks, and I really like the color range of Lawn Fawn. These were gifted to me, and I really love them. The felt pad is fine. It doesn't necessarily cause any issues. I like the color choices of Lawn Fawn. I really like that. And the other thing I will say is I like to buy ink pads from a company that has cardstock that is the same color, because I like to get an ink pad. You know, if I'm using Peacock, the color, maybe I want the ink and a piece of cardstock that matches. The next one that I have a handful of are Close to My Heart ink pads, and Close to My Heart is no longer in business. Their ink pads are magnetic, and so they have that like they stick to each, you know, the top and bottom stick to each other. It is a felt pad as well. It's much larger. I feel like in my hand it's not as comfortable as this. And because this company is out of business, you may be able to find these ink pads like on eBay, you know, with the re-inker, or you might find them at like a thrift store or a yard sale or something like that. They're great quality ink pads. I really love them, and I won't get rid of mine until they are out of commission, until they don't work anymore. Again, I don't have a ton of them, but the ones that I do have, I will definitely keep. I liked the color selection of Close to My Heart, and I have a lot of 12 by 12 cardstock that is from that company, and so I have things that match. Okay, so that is like your colored ink pads. Now, I have a few other ink pads. I have a couple of the Ali Edward ink pads. They are on foam, so much like Stampin' Up. They're not great quality, but Ali Edward's company is not really about ink pads. It's more about stamps. She has a handful of colors. I have a few. I have 3 of her colors. I don't really care for her ink pads, quite honestly. I just don't feel like the quality is all that great. I had wanted to try them out. I did. I don't really reach for the 3 that I have very often. Then I have a couple more like specialty, and I have like a rose gold, a gold, and a silver, and this is the brand that I use for those, and they are a foam ink pad, so they're not the felt, and they have great coverage, and I really like them for the metallic. I only use these for special occasions, so I just have those 3, and I have re-inkers for them. Now for black and white stamp pads, which I stamp, I do a lot of stamping like in black. That's, you know, the preferred, you know, if you're doing something quick, I'm not always reaching for color. So my black ones, I have the VersaFine. Now this is an older VersaFine, and it is attached. They now come like this. This is my newer one. They are a felt pad. VersaFine is the thing that I use most for sentiments because it stamps really nicely. It stamps very fine. You can get very fine details. I will hold on to this one until it's all dry, and then I'll just keep this one. I have my Memento and then my Stays On, again, because you need different black inks for different mediums. And I'm not always good about remembering which one. I oftentimes have to look up which one is for which. So I have both of those. I do have a brown Stays On as well. And then I have a black one from Lawn Fawn, and it's really good. That's the same felt pad, and I really like it, and you know, I use it. And then I have several white ones, and I had just tried out. White ink pads are really, they're very finicky. White ink, depending on where you're stamping, what kind of surface you're putting it on, is really going to determine the quality and what you get out of it. So I have the Simon Says, I have the Lawn Fawn, and I have the Hero Hues, and that's by Hero Arts. And this one is actually my favorite, the Hero Arts white, and then the Simon Says, and then the Lawn Fawn. That's the way that I would rate them. So that is ink pads. You know, that is your basic for your ink pads. Now I'll give you a little tour of all of my inks here, and I can share with you, you know, how I store them and where they're at and what I reach for. So let's do that, and then we will dive into some basic stamps, and then I have a 6x8 project for you, so you can always just skip through. I will try to time stamp these videos, so you can just skip right through the project if you would like. All right, it's slightly dark in here, but just let me show you where my ink pads are. I have all of my Close to My Heart ink pads right up there, and you can see the colors that I have. Maybe that'll be better. My Lawn Fawn inks are right here. I created my own labels for the sides of those, just with some sticker paper, and then adding the color to the sticker paper, and then adding that. And then down below are my Concord and Ninth, right here. My Ali Edwards, and then those 3 specialty are right there. And then my Stampin' Up inks are right here. And then they just go in rainbow order. All of my supplies up here are in rainbow order. And then my neutrals are down here. Just like that. And then my black and white ink pads are right here in this drawer. And in this drawer, I have my blocks, which we're going to talk about when we talk about stamps. And then I also keep my black and white inks here. And then I keep my stamp, my Misty, which is a stamping platform. I just keep right there. And this is what I reach for quite a bit. So that's where everything is. And then next, let's look at stamps. So I have a lot of stamps. Probably not as many as some, but I do have, and I'm sorry it's dark in here, all of my Stampin' Up! Stamps that I have kept are here. So the ones that are in cases are on the red rubber, okay? And I will bring this over to my desk and I will show you the difference between that in just a second. And then all of my Stampin' Up! That are on photopolymer are just in sleeves so that they don't take up as much space. I have all of my regular stamps in alphabetical order going this way, and then down here are Christmas and holiday stamps. Over here, these are all my alpha stamps here, and then these are my 6x8 stamps from like Ali Edwards. All of these are my close to my heart stamps that I have taken out of the original package. I've put them in clear like DVD cases, and I've added them so that they fit on my shelf. And then in here are some Concord and Ninth stamps and some other stamp brands. Down here are some of the very last close to my heart stamps I got right before they went out of business, or the ones that when they went to Stampin' Up, I got a couple there. And then I have some of my alphas here. These are Lawn Fawn alpha stamps. And like my Faith stamps and those types of stamps. Again, these are close to my heart. These are all like by the month, like January through December. And then I have like Project Lifestyle. Then I have like Holiday. I sort of know where everything is. So nothing's labeled because I just don't feel like I need to have it labeled. And then down here are all of my Ali Edwards stamps. And last year, I completely tore apart all of my Ali Edwards stamps, and I put them in categories and put them on acetate and put them like this. So I took them out of the original package, and these are the ones that I reach for the most, are my Ali Edward ones. So that is where my stamps are held. So now let's go back to my desk. I'm going to pull out the different types of stamps. I'm going to show you that, and then we're going to dive into our creative project for today. All right, let's talk about stamps. Let's do a little stamping, and then let's do our creative project. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is the difference in stamps. So this is a stamp set from Stampin' Up. This is actually one of the very first stamp sets I fell in love with, and it's very, very old, and it is the heart stamp set. I also have this stamp set in here, so I double up my stamps, and this is back when the cling part of the stamp for Stampin' Up was not very sticky. Now they're very sticky, but you just put your stamp on your block, and this is a red rubber stamp, and so it has a red rubber where the image is. Okay, some people prefer red rubber, and some people prefer photopolymer or clear. They're referred to as clear. This is another one from Stampin' Up. You can see when I have a clear one, I just put it in a clear plastic envelope so it doesn't take up as much space. And you do the same thing with this. And one of my favorite things is the smell of clear stamps, like photopolymer. I love the smell of it. It just smells like creativity. So you just pull that off and you stick it to your block, and then you're going to use this block to do your stamping. So it works pretty much the same way. So I have Stampin' Up red rubber stamps. I have Stampin' Up! Photopolymer stamps, and the quality of your stamp matters. Now, regardless of how I feel about Stampin' Up! Personally, I will be very honest with you, and I will tell you that their stamp quality is really amazing. I did have the opportunity to visit the warehouse where the stamps were made. I saw the way they made the photopolymer stamps, and one of the things about Stampin' Up's photopolymer is it is designed in a way that is a really good quality. And same thing with their red rubber. If you get stamps, you know, in the past when I was getting them, they were really great quality. I don't, you know, I haven't bought stamps from them in about a year, so I couldn't tell you now, but I know when I was getting them, they were really good quality, and I really appreciated that, because I once got stamp sets that were Amy Tangerine, and if you know Amy Tangerine, you know she's a really big name in the creative world, in the crafting world, and her stamps were the worst stamps. I threw them away. They were horrible. They didn't stamp well. They didn't get a clear image. They were flimsy. They didn't stick to the block. I was so disappointed in getting a name brand, you know, Amy Tangerine stamp, and they were crap. And so the quality really does matter. So those are two Stampin' Up! Ones. All of my Close to My Heart are in these containers. I know it's really hard to see the stamp, but they are the clear stamps. These are a little bit yellow, and that happens when you've had them for a long time. They will often turn a little bit yellow. They're not bad. If it is a good quality stamp, then it won't fall apart or crack or anything. And Close to My Heart was pretty good quality. Next I have, this is Lawn Fawn, and you can see that it's a little bit yellow. I've had it for a long time. I am a sucker for alpha stamps. I love them. You will see. So this is a Lawn Fawn, and it turned a little yellow. Lawn Fawn, pretty good stamps. I like their stamps. Okay, next let me talk about my Ali Edwards before I share some of the other ones. So this is a 6x8 Ali Edwards. It's an alpha. You can see that. I just keep it on the plastic. The 6x8s are a little bit hard to store because they're so big. And then this is how I store my other Ali Edwards stamps. Again, I took all of them off the original, out of their original packaging, and I put them together under themes. So you can see that I have all of my cameras on one, and they're on acetate. I have a whole video where I share doing this. I'll try to remember to link it. But if I want a camera, I just pull this out and I have all of my cameras. Same with my word phrase ones. You can see I've used these a lot. I've used these a lot. Now, let me just do a little, I don't know, like a little everybody be calm kind of moment. Your stamps are going to get stained, especially if they are these photopolymer, clear, acrylic, whichever ones that they're going to get stained. It's not a big deal. You can get StazOn cleaner. I'll show you how to clean them in just a second, but they're going to get stained, and just be okay with it. Don't be the person that needs your stamps to look brand new all the time. Be the person that uses your stamps and lets them get, you know, used. I've used this camera so many times over the years. I love it. It's one of these two are my favorite. And you can just see that they're used, and they're gonna get stamped, they're gonna get stained, they're gonna turn yellow, and it's okay. Just be okay with it. I promise. Life goes on. It's totally okay. My Ali Edwards stamps are probably the one that I use the most of. I got her stamp sets for 12 years, and I love her stamps. I use them quite a bit. So, now I have some random brands here. This is from Bitsy Hands Creation, and there's two in here, and they're clear, and they're coffee sets. And I got that at the Scrapbook Expo. I haven't had a chance to use these yet, but we might use them in this series. And then I just recently started getting, this is from Hepa. She is my little journal on on YouTube here, and I've started getting her stamps. She has some really great takes on stamps. I got a couple of her alphas, but then she had a migraine one, and I suffer with migraines, and I thought it was a great stamp set, and then I couldn't resist anything emoji related. I'm all over. I really love it. She has one right now in the news, and I would really love to get that one because I think it is super like great for like memory keeping. So those are all the types of stamps. So let's talk about actually stamping, and let's use my favorite camera stamp to do this, and let's use some VersaFine. So we have some VersaFine here. We're gonna dive in, and we're just gonna get inky. So let's use my favorite camera. Some of these, if they lose their stickiness, you can wash them in warm soapy water and they will get sticky again. But to stamp, you're just gonna put your stamp on your block, or if you wanna use a platform, you can. I do that for really precise stamping. Most of the time I just use a block. I like Stampin' Up! Blocks because they have the hand grip like for your fingers, but you just need something. I mean, you can use the lid of a stamp pad if you want. You don't have to have anything special to do it. I've stamped many times with different things. So what you're gonna do is, depending on your ink pad, now this is a felt, so you're really gonna get in there, make out with that ink, get in there, get your stamp all inked up, and then you're gonna come in and you're gonna press straight down and you're gonna lift straight up. Okay, so let's get in really close and look at that. And I do apologize for my voice. I am getting over being sick, and so I sound like a crazy person. And then you can see that. Okay, so a couple things. When you first have a stamp, let's use one of Hepa's. So let's use the migraine one. Stupid migraines, right? Anybody else suffer with them? Her stamps are really good quality as well. I really like Hepa's product. Okay, so your first time using a clear stamp, what you're gonna see is sometimes it doesn't have the best image straight out of the package. So let's just try this and just see what it does. So it's pretty good, but you can see, oops, that the lines are not perfect. They're not super crisp. So we'll clean this off. So what you can do is take your hand and just rub the stamp set on there, and what's gonna happen is, let's grab another one so you can see what happens. So if you can see that it's really super clear, and if you rub your hand over it just gently, you will see that it gets a little cloudy. You can also take a sand eraser or a regular red eraser or white eraser and go over the surface of it. You can also take a very fine nail file and go over the surface of it, and what you're doing is you're removing the film that is on the stamp when it's brand new. There is a film that can make your stamping look like bubbly, or the lines are not as crisp. So after you do that, the ink will absorb into the stamp really, really well. You ink that up and you stamp it, and you're going to get a really crisp image. Now with stamping, I tend to be a stamper that likes things to be pretty perfect. If you watch Ali Edwards, you will see that she does not stamp perfect, and she does not care. She just goes in and she does it. And I wish I could be a little bit more loose with my stamping, but I do tend to want it to be a little bit more perfect, so I'm a little bit more precise. It's just gonna depend on your personality and how you like stamping. Some stamps, what you're going to want to do is, and you will learn this as you stamp more, the best way to become better at stamping is to do it more. So you will find that you get a feel for it. You get a feel for how much ink you need on your stamp. You will get a feel for the different types of ink pads. You will get a feel for when you're pressing down. Now, I've been stamping long enough that when I press down, I can kind of rock back and forth to get the image that I want. Now, if you press, let's get a colored ink. So I'm going to use my Stampin' Up! Because it's just the closest. Okay, so let's say that you're stamping with a color and you have a foam ink pad and you really smush it in there and then you press it down and you get, if you rock it, you get all this stuff around it. I'm really trying to be messy here. I'm really pressing in. And you really get a messy image. It's because you're pressing and you're getting ink all over your block. So you really want to know what kind of ink you're working with. You really want to avoid getting ink in all the little crevices. And then that happens, you know, you drop it. That's okay, just clean it up. Much crisper, right? So, and if you rock it, sometimes what will happen is it'll be blurry. So you just want to try your best to go down on your paper and right back up. See, I rocked it and I got some on the edge. Okay? And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you don't mind it, it's totally fine. Let's do the camera. Bermuda Bay is one of my favorite colors. Just like that. And that, my ink pad might need to be re-inked. Yeah, it looks like it probably needs to be re-inked. And I would probably get a really crisp. Let's use one of my ink pads that I just got from Concord and Ninth. So here is Plumberry. And this is a brand new one, so it might be really, really juicy. Sometimes your ink pads are really, really juicy. And so you're gonna get a lot of ink. Again, as you just practice more and you get a feel for it, oh, that came out so good. That's a beautiful color. I love it. And those two colors go really well together. Came out really good. Okay, so that is probably my best explanation of stamping. If you have any questions about the actual stamping part, or you're running into issues or you have thoughts, please leave them in the comments below and I'll answer them next week when I come back and we do our next video. We're gonna dive in to a creative project here, and so I can show you some stamping in an actual project. And then I just use baby wipes to clean mine. You can get a stamp cleaning like system where you spray and it or you can use a stamp chamois. Those things give me the heebie-jeebies. I just don't like the feel of them. And so I just use, you know, I just usually get these and they clean up really nice. I'm also very bad about cleaning my stamps. I forget to. I just wipe them off. And of course they're stained and I'm totally fine with that. So let me clean this mess up and then let's dive into the creative project for this week. All right, let's dive into the creative part of this project. So I have my stamps. I'm gonna use the photo stamp, maybe a stamp off this. I'm definitely using a phrase off my word phrase stamps. For sure, I already have that one on here. And it says life is made up of memories. I have picked out some products. So these are the colors I'm going to use. Maybe something like this. This might be too bright, so I might end up only using this. I matched it to this. These are the two pieces, and there's a little bit of red in there, so I grabbed a red one. I'm using all Concord and Ninth today. So these are going to be up here, okay? So what I have here are the two patterns that I'm going to use. I have this acrylic piece that says details. This is the photo I'm using. We're going to do a 6x8 page. So I'm probably going to trim this down some because this takes up a lot. And then what I want to do is the stamping portion is going to be on these. So what I'm hoping... So I might trim these down a little bit more. So these are 2 inches by 3 inches. And what I might do... All right, we're going to dive right into the voiceover portion, and I've sped things up because this video, as you can see, is very long. So the first thing I did is I just trimmed down those 3 pieces. I originally was going to use a few more. I was going to use 5 of those, but I just didn't have the space. And then I also trimmed down this photo and then I reprint it because I end up wanting it to be 6x4, like a normal size photo. I took my corner rounder and I rounded the corner, and then you're going to see on this creative project I use my ink pads and my stamps in a couple different ways. The really great thing about stamp pads is you have this ability to use these colors without using necessarily cardstock. This is a acetate piece from Ali Edwards, and so it had a film over it. I just peeled that off, and originally I was going to do these strips and layer the photo. I will end up trimming the other piece of acetate, and then I will reprint my photo because I ended up using it just as a 6x4 photo. So the great thing in having ink colors is that you can use them in a variety of ways. And I'm going to use my ink pads to color the top of these little cards that I created. And that's going to allow me to add some color to this. And then we're going to stamp. So here I reprinted the photo, and then I added the floral piece to the bottom, and then that strip that I cut from the triangle piece, and then my photo to the top. And then this is an acrylic piece. It's from Ali Edwards, and it says details. I'm going to use glue dots to add that. And this is all my foundational part before I get to the stamping. And I wanted to just mention a few things in the creative portion that maybe I might have missed when we were going over some of the details like the stamp pads and the stamps. I really feel like when it comes to stamping, it's really about your mindset. You can dive in and do lots of different things. Now, I have definitely avoided using my stamps because it is a little bit more tedious. You're getting product out, you're getting stamp pads out, you're finding the stamps, you have to clean the stamps, you know, all of that. So it is a little bit more, it's another step, right? Just like when you're die cutting, you have to get all the pieces out and you have to die cut. So you need to plan accordingly when you're sitting down to do that. But I really feel like it's your mindset. If you sit down and you're just willing to have fun with it, it's not as intimidating or as hard as it might seem. The best thing you can do is just dive in and try it. And not every single thing you stamp is going to be perfect. And you're going to see that when I do some of my stamping, because I'm filming and I'm at an angle, my stamping is going to come out crooked, and I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it, and I'm going to move on, and I'm going to do the project, because done is better than perfect. And that is something that I remind myself a lot of. I think when you're using stamping for memory keeping purposes, it's a lot easier to have that mindset of done is better than perfect. When you're making cards, I definitely, when I'm making cards, I want things to be a lot more perfect. And it's probably one of the reasons that I don't truly enjoy making cards, is because there is more pressure for me to make it perfect. So all I did here is I used some washi tape. I decided not to get totally precise and use the ruler. I decided I would just put the washi tape in, use my grid mat, and stamp. So I was testing out my stamp right there that says life is made up of moments, not memories, moments. And I was worried it wasn't going to fit across, and so I just did some stamping on the back to make sure. And this is where you're going to see that my head gets in the way a little bit, and the stamp definitely comes out. You can see crooked right there. Now, this definitely bothered me, and I wanted to redo the whole thing and restamp. And then I realized each one that I was stamping was coming out crooked because of the angle I was at. When I'm not filming, which is very rarely, but you probably won't be filming when you are creating, you can get it much straighter because you can get directly over it. But you see they're a little bit crooked. Now, when I add my journaling to this, which you'll see at the end, you will see that it's not terrible, and it was definitely something that I could live with. It is a little bit hard when you're first starting out to judge the size of things. So where things are going to fit or how something is going to fit. Again, all of that comes with practice. And then in a little bit, you're going to see that I stamp on that wood veneer. Originally, I was going to use stars because there was a couple sets of stars that I had that really matched the colors. However, I felt like a heart went better with my overall page. So I'll end up using hearts, but I will stamp on that wood veneer. And the great thing about stamps is you can really stamp on just about anything. Depending on what kind of ink you're using, remember you have to use different kinds of inks. If you're stamping on something slick, you want stays on. But really, like this wood veneer, I'm going to be able to stamp with just my regular ink. And so by stamping, you can really open up so much creativity. You can take your stamps and cut them out and make embellishments. You really have so many possibilities. And I really want to share with you during this series, I have 4 we're going to do this all of May. Every Friday, I will have a video for you. And then I also, for several weeks, I will have multiple projects for you. So that will be really awesome. So here I had ink on my finger, and that happens. And I touched the bottom of the little piece that I had made, and it got ink on there. I took my sand eraser and I erased the surface of the paper. It removed some of it, but not all of it. And so I just took my white out and added that over my little mistake. When I add my journaling, you won't even be able to see it. Oftentimes you saw earlier, I dropped my stamp and it went right into the ink. And then I often will get ink on my fingers. I'm not super careful. I am a kind of crafter that I just sit down and I go for it. I get all the things out. I have everything on my desk. I have the inks out. I'm putting stamps in ink. I'm using the ink pads. And so that often happens. And again, I just try not to worry about it. Once I put my journaling over it, you won't even be able to see that whiteout. But I do have a little rolling whiteout that I keep. You can also use a white gel pen, or even your white paint pen will cover up on white if you happen to drop it like I did or get ink on it. So I stamped life on that heart, and then I came back with my journaling. I typed out my journaling on the computer, and then for this project I definitely could have done 3 details. So I could have, each one of those boxes that I created, I could have had a separate set of journaling. What I ended up doing was just doing my journaling across all 3. So you just read, all of that journaling is basically one paragraph or one thing I want to say, and then it's split up into 3. Now, I mismeasured when I did my journaling, and this was very, very, it was like right, it barely fit on here basically. And that was because I mismeasured. And so I had to just shimmy it on there basically. It did work. I did not want to reprint my journaling. I knew that this video was already, I'd already been working on this for several hours and I needed to get it filmed. And so I just went ahead and I made it work. I printed my journaling on sticker paper and then I added it. You see, it works pretty well. I trimmed off the extra. I try to be really space saving with my journaling when I'm doing it on sticker paper. I try to make sure that I'm not wasting a lot of sticker paper. And so because of that, I just didn't want to reprint it, but I just added that right to the cards. And then I stamped the camera on top of the orange. Now you saw that I used the ink pads to color the top of those cards. You have to let that dry. Depending on what kind of ink you have, will depend on how long it takes to dry. Also, you have to be aware that depending on what kind of ink pad you're using, the ink will dry differently. So sometimes you'll see that it is a lot brighter, or you'll see that the ink looks a little splotchy. And as it dries back and it soaks into the paper, it will get a little bit crisper, or the color will change slightly. And so it also can take a long time for ink to dry. So as I used the ink pads to color the tops of those cards, it did take a little bit of time to dry, and then I stamped the black camera right over the orange ink that I had done. You have to be careful. If I hadn't let it dry, then the black would have bleeded into the orange. So there's definitely a bit of a learning curve when you're stamping and you're using ink pads, and you will just learn that as you go. So have grace with yourself as you are diving into this, and just know that each time you do it, you learn something new. And then before you know it, you're stamping and you're loving it, and it's not as difficult. The most difficult part of stamping is getting started and diving into all of it. And also remember, you don't have to have every single product. You don't have to have 90 different blocks. You don't have to have all the different brands of ink. My best advice is to find an ink that you like, that you feel comfortable with. Again, I prefer the foam ink pads as opposed to the felt ink pads. And so for me, if I was brand new to stamping and starting out stamping, I would choose to go with Concord and Ninth. Those are the stamps I would choose to go with, and the ink pads I would choose to go with. So pick a brand that you like, that you feel good about purchasing. Purchase a few things and just dive in and try different things and just get a feel for it. I am using some Stampin' Up! Dimensionals. I have a lot of these on hand, and I'm popping up these 3 journaling blocks, and all 3 of them I will pop up. This is a very dimensional page. The acrylic piece is dimensional, the wood veneers are dimensional, and then I'm popping these up. It was easy to pull these up off the acetate because that's a clear piece, and I didn't center these the best. Again, I had been working on this quite a bit. I had been talking quite a bit, and I was feeling pretty exhausted by this time because I was just getting over being sick. I wasn't pretty sick, but I was just getting over it. So it's not perfect, but again, if anything that I can repeat over and over to you during this series is It really doesn't have to be perfect. I love this project. I will put it in my personal project life album. And that is our first project. So join me next week for our second week of stamping. I hope you enjoyed this series. Any questions you have, please let me know in the comments below, and I will catch you in my next video. Thank you so much for checking out my video. Here on the screen are 2 other videos that you can check out if you would like. If you remember watching this video and you've missed any of the member videos, or you're new, you can go back and watch older member videos if you would like. Thank you so much for checking out my video, and I will catch you in my very next project.